It's like East and West, right? There's a saying that in the West, first we negotiate, then sign the contract and start working on it. In China, is there's the opposite, right? You sign the contract, that's beginning of negotiations. In India, could be both. We had the Skype call for 30 minutes, and then this person installed our software platform on his site, and it was running in 30 minutes. That was shocking. It was like the fastest I've ever seen.
When you're dealing with, especially kind of lockdown type situations, and you're dealing with people who are, maybe not going out to restaurants and not going out to events and we're spending more time at home, people have more time to do these things, but that makes it more competitive.
In India, there's always room for negotiation. Right? In Hindi, you say, "Kuch discount milega." It's like.
Welcome to ET Catalyze, the international special. Today, we're discussing India. We have with us guests from across the world who will talk to us the potential India holds, how their experience has been, and why it's important to have a partner in India to launch yourself. Glad to have you, Teague from Starting 11, Alex from One World Online, and Gaurang from Indoors. If I can start with you, Gaurang, you have a software which essentially understands the talent of a tech programmer, have a tool that assesses his or her potential, but when you test Indians on it, how's been the experience for you?
That's a tricky question. But yeah, it's been great actually. So a lot of our candidates that companies are hiring, they come from India actually. And I'm surprised to say that some developers in India are scoring very high on the rubrics. In India, what happens is the software quality, the code quality is really good most of the times. But most of the Indian developers, they don't do testing on their code, which is very important. That's very peculiar about some Indian developers.
India, they say, has a great demographic dividend. The population is the boon. But what is the key potential that you see in the India market?
Well, first of all, India is huge, right? And we all understand this is the biggest democracy in the world. And we are very much fit into Indian market with our solutions and products overall. But of course, like you said, it's impossible to do business without being present in the country or having the right partner and understanding the culture and the processes. And we're doing it for 5 years and learning, of course, and they're still learning. But it's interesting landscape, right? Because it's a mix of probably different approaches, different cultures. It's not one unified territory, right? A lot of different people, different backgrounds, and different ways to do business. And it's fascinating, to be honest.
Any interesting anecdote, experience that you'd like to share with us? Something that you learned with the multivariate cultural India?
Absolutely. It's like East and West, right? There's a saying that in the West, first we negotiate, then sign the contract and start working on it. In China, is there's the opposite, right? You sign the contract, that's beginning of negotiations. In India, could be both, right? It depends on who you're dealing with. That's kind of interesting learning. I've seen both cases. For example, the head of Times Group introduced me to one of the big India media holdings at the early days of our engagement. And the decision was done in 30 minutes. We had the Skype call for 30 minutes. And then this person installed our software platform on his site, and it was running in 30 minutes. That was shocking. It was like the fastest I've ever seen. But then I had to deal with another company, and it took almost a year to close the deal. So I've seen two extremes and everything in between.
So India does give you a variety. You learn to deal with all kinds. Teague, how about you? How's been your India experience, and any interesting anecdotes when you launched or at least approached or thought of entering India?
So we have a fantasy football platform that users download and compete in contests with other users every match day. And so for us, the challenge sometimes when you're a B2C company like that is, can you find the potential customers? Are there enough of them out there? We have the exact opposite challenge. We have 140 million fantasy sports players in India, the largest market in the world. We have 230 million football fans in India, one of the largest markets in the world. So our challenge, I think, has been just how diverse the country is, not only in terms of culturally, but also in terms of, we deal with fan allegiance a lot. So it's learning things like, all right, this city has a bunch of Manchester United fans. This city has a bunch of Manchester City fans. This city is a Liverpool city. So learning those things as you go along and then kind of tailoring some of your messaging has been a big piece of learning for us.
When it comes to football, I'm sure you would have been equally surprised by the amount of fans that India has. Although India is known to be a cricket religion country, but it still holds a big amount of people who are big football fans. Anything different between an Indian football fan than an American or a European?
I think it's more similar to an American football fan, actually. I think that, football is the second largest sport by popularity in the country. It's the fastest growing. So our customers and then football fans in general in India tend to be a little bit younger. The demographic skews a little bit younger, and they use mobile more. And that's consistent with what you see in the United States, actually. And I think part of the reason that that's true is because for a lot of us, finding that really high quality football wasn't a domestic possibility. You know, there wasn't a great American league. You know, the Indian Super League is doing really well. That's a relatively recent phenomenon. And so a lot of fans, you know, if you were a football fan, let's say 10 years ago, you really had to search it out. I mean, you had to be on satellite dishes and websites, and you really had to go find it. Now it's much more available. What that's led to, I think, is a fandom that is really committed. There's the growth potential there that maybe isn't the case for some of the other sports, but you're seeing, you know, with the availability of the content, you're seeing a lot more interest and a lot more growth.
What are the potential challenges that you see when one enters India?
Challenges are understanding the cultural nuances mainly. In my leadership team at Indos, we have some people who are not from India, German people from France, you know. And for these people, when we go to India, we are trying to do a deal with the client. We are trying to negotiate some contracts, as Alex was saying. In India, there's always room for negotiation, right? In Hindi, you say, kuch discount milega. It's like,
right. Value hunters, as they say. Yeah.
That's what we know as Indians, is that everything can be bargained for, right? And second part is about jugaad, right? So you always strive to make your product very, one of the best in the world. But sometimes some jugaad works as well, right?
Is that a challenge or is that a potential?
Potential. That's a potential, I'd say. Yeah, not a challenge.
Right. This is a question around football and simulation. Especially during COVID, there's so much of simulation happening. At least in India, the IPL game has simulated cheer. Some call it fake cheer. The purists abhor it. What happens in football? Does it put off the purists?
Depends on how it's done. I think if it's done in an artificial way where there's kind of this, you know, where it sounds canned or tin-like or fake, I think people really dislike it. I think if it's done in a way that sounds familiar to a trained ear, I think it can actually add some ambiance to the situation, because you kind of expect, when you're a football fan, sort of that low level din happening all the time, because it's a constant game, right? There's always movement, there's always something happening. And so the crowd is always reacting to it. So I think some broadcasters do it really well. I think others do not do it as well. The people who like it, I think, are looking for that sense of familiarity and that sense of normalcy. And I think that's what football brings to people, especially right now, is that feeling that, okay, we have community shared experiences. We have things that we can enjoy during times that are really challenging. Depends on how it's done, I think.
Basis the research that you would have done and the early experience that you had, for those who have not even thought about it, why should they enter India? What would you have to say to them?
Well, I think we touch on the size a little bit, right? I mean, it's the biggest market in the world. It's the biggest market in the world for what we do. You know, if you're a company that's in mobile, that's in gaming in particular, demographically, you're not going to find a better country in the world. In terms of data usage and smartphone availability, you're not going to find a better country in the world. And so I think for me, it's just the scope of the opportunity.
I have this rule of 3 in life. Usually you can break any problem or any situation in 3 major components. And exactly like this in India, we got 3 challenges to enter the market and get funding from Times Group. The first one was a stress test. That's actually very real, because when you launch a popular site in India with your platform running on it, you immediately see a huge spike in load, the traffic coming from these new customers. And yeah, it's a survival test. And many systems just fail because they're not prepared for this type of increase in traffic. Those are stress tests in India. The second, to your point, yeah, even though the population is English speaking, but it's still important to support local languages, because the publisher that we were dealing with, they had a lot of sections in different languages, Senegali, Tamil, and many, many others, Gujarati. So we did a very rapid translation of our platform. We understood that this is important. Yes, English is universal language, but it's much more comfortable for people sometimes read the news and discuss them in other languages. That was the second big component which we survived. And third, to the point that everybody made, its local presence. So I had to put a team very quickly in India to support all these deployment activities. And once we satisfied 3 criteria, then we were up and running.
That's an interesting learning, that although English can be your starting point, the huge untapped potential lies in the other languages. So quickly move to them as well.
Absolutely. Correct. Right. We translated our platform to 30 languages, and probably a dozen of them are from India.
How important is it to have a local partner who will sort of, at least in the initial days, handhold you and take you around? I
used to have a team in Gujarat, and now we have multiple people in different parts of the country helping here and there. Because, yeah, I see the difference indeed in support, how it happens in India versus other places. It's still very popular just to call people over the phone and solve the problems this way. We don't see it much in the US, right? People usually using messengers or some kind of online tools. In India, live conversation over the phone seems to be still typical, behavior for many people. And also, yeah, kind of intrigued very, very much how India is going to transition to this global world with the online presence and kind of chats and communication online, where it doesn't really even matter where people are, because that's something we see in the crypto world and blockchain world. I'm sure Gorank will see the same thing because he's in this situation. We all live on like Telegram or WhatsApp or some Slack or Discord, or a bunch of messages out there. They'll have groups, a lot of collaboration. Sometimes you don't even know where people come from. You just know what they're doing, right? What is their contribution? What's their role? I think India is getting integrated into the global environment, but I'm not quite sure. And that's something interesting.
You made an interesting point. The difference between how people are comfortable outside India with text chat, messenger, WhatsApp, mails. But in India, they get more confidence, I guess, with phones, or they're more comfortable with phones. On that point, Goran, if I can get you in, you've been in India, worked in India, and now you operate Singapore, London, and all the places. How's been your experience? Because for you also, there is the dual play that plays out for you. When you're in Europe, I'm sure you use more of the text communication, which Alex referred to. But when in India, it's the phone maybe that's more trusted. Maybe voice is important for them, and that builds the trust, so to say. How do you handle these nuances and the balance between the two?
I think the Indian population as a whole, including people from my parents' generations or even grandparents' generation, phone is definitely important for them. But now a lot of them are moving to WhatsApp. And if you see, WhatsApp groups are so active in India, right? All our relatives are on those groups, and just going crazy, right? Like WhatsApp has grown by leaps and bounds in the last few years.
But that's with familiar people. Does that work in business also?
Yes, definitely, especially in the B2C environment. And for us, for Indors, most of our candidates or clients that are coming on the platform, users are mostly tech savvy because they're software developers. So they are already familiar with these platforms, right? And even non-technical people, business people, they are mostly familiar with WhatsApp and all these things. So it's never been a problem for us. And since we are targeting metro cities to begin with, like Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, it's pretty okay for us. So frankly, if I look at it, there's not much difference between London and between a software developer in London and that in Bangalore. They are at par, I would say. Similar to Alex, we also have this hackathon going on. And it's quite surprising, So when my team was trying to do outreach to them through email, the response was slightly lower. But when they started using WhatsApp to do outreach, it was just phenomenal. We started getting 70-80% responses back from the candidates.
People don't really care for privacy, it seems. It's perfectly fine as long as they get the WhatsApp. It's maybe the convenience of having the device in your hands perpetually, almost all the time.
What surprised me is, like last year, I was talking to one of my cousins in India, and they're like, "Oh, I'm on social media and I'm on WhatsApp." So they consider WhatsApp as social media, which is quite interesting for me.
Digital business models globally have been always dependent on scale, monetization. The bigger you get, the more numbers you have, the better funding you get. Scale is so important. With now COVID, digital is the way to build scale. That's sort of become the imperative choice now. There's just no other option left. What do you think will drive this digital business in future years? I mean, digital is one way to scale it, and you're in that business very clearly. The online, offline, even post-COVID, will that leave a lasting impact, and how?
I think so. I mean, I think that one of the things that I think is different now versus even a couple of years ago is the metrics that people want to look at are different. People want to see growth quicker. But the things that they're looking at are not necessarily kind of linear growth lines. What they're looking at are other things like engagement. How much actual interaction do you have with these platforms? And that itself is a sign of growth. And that itself is a sign that you have a, kind of like the three of us are doing, we're looking at venture scale outcomes for these businesses, right? Not slow growth, but explosive growth. And so I think that one major difference is the types of things that people see as indicators are different now with this digital revolution, really. And so if you have a product form that understands that and feeds into that, I think you're going to be better positioned for the kind of venture scale outcome that we're all looking for.
Alex, on the similar question, while India provides you the opportunity to scale, and you've been around for the last 5 years, how easy or difficult is monetization when you come with the scale opportunity of India?
Very good question, because indeed, I agree with Tik. Yeah, one thing is growth, the other thing is engagement and actual metrics and conversions that come out of it. And it's a very interesting question because we are literally like for the last few months did Republic campaign, the crowdfunding campaign. Our company right now is between around A and B. And usually what people do, they put convertible note, which is a temporary kind of non-priced round, just to raise money and test see the response. And we did a pretty significant promotion in India. And it's all about conversions now, right? It's the actual metrics, fundraising and monetization. If people willing to participate and actually contribute something. And we found a very interesting pattern. It was extremely slow at the beginning. Because and sometimes in the US or Western world in general, we see people come into some place where there's an offer and they make a quick decision, especially if we talk about small amount of money. What I think happened in India, even though the ticket was as small as $100 for crowdfunding platforms, it's still almost nobody made decision the first visit. It seems like people really need to come second or third time before they make their mind. And with this, once we understood it, we actually put additional effort to do more touch points, right? And try to present our offer multiple times. So first people see it, for example, on the one distribution channel, then on Facebook, then on digital media. And then we noticed that on the second, third, and following visits, a lot of people started making decisions. And actually ticket sizes that came from India surprised me in a good way. Some of them will come in much like higher than average. So probably there's definitely some layer of people that are really interested and they just need to require multiple iterations. So that's one observation. And if you go back to core business, the advertising business that we have, India is an interesting market because yes, it's not as high advertising revenue or CPM-based revenue as US, for example, but the volume compensates for it, right? Mm-hmm. So even you get half of the advertising money in India, but multiplied by the volume, it still totally makes sense. So yes, there's certain techniques and the models are very differentiated, right? You can make money and not just one way. It's still something we're learning, right? Because there's the online advertising, there's online research, there's incentive. Like Gaurang and I, we are both involved in blockchain model, which means that there are tokens in play. And it's interesting time and space because monetization models are changing dramatically. I think going forward, like we discussed, Internet of Value and token-based economies are going to be common, including India, regardless of what regulators do. You cannot stop the progress. If Uber brings value to people and to businesses, it's going to be adapted. If cryptocurrency brings benefits to people, it's going to be adapted. No matter how long government resists in the US or India or other countries, people are going to win, technology is going to win, the progress is going to win.
It might take time to scale and build trust and get monetization, but once it happens, then it's a happy experience.
Absolutely, right. And it's a very good point because experience is very important for monetization, right? When people are happy, when they get the value they want, then the monetization comes on top of it.
Adding on to that point, Deepak, we have seen similar things in India, right? So people usually don't trust anything that's new or that they don't know about, especially Indians, right? So as Alex said, they need multiple touch points. And for us, although digital brings in the volume, the actual conversion sometimes happens when we do an ad in the print media, when we do a front page ad in Times of India or Economic Times. That's when people trust your brand. And it is so awesome that last time we were in Bangalore, pre-COVID times, we went to meet a client in Bangalore. And as soon as we entered their office, they're like, hey, we have seen your ad in the newspaper. So yeah, so we think that, they think that, okay, we are someone to actually take notice of. And they start respecting you, right? So it's like buying a Mercedes or buying a BMW in India versus buying some other brand, right?
What has happened is for any company essentially launching in India or anywhere for that matter now, the touch points which otherwise used to be offline in supermarkets and stores and various other brick and mortar situations, they've all been pushed to digital. What does this mean when it comes to innovate? Because suddenly if you want to increase the touch points on digital, you have to be innovative. Any experience that you've had on innovation around digital touch points?
A lot of things, a lot of business models are now moving online. They're trying to innovate and trying to cope with the situation. And personally, what I feel is once these things start moving online, it starts gaining more efficiencies, I would say. So for example, an online hackathon, it can go on for 7 days or even 1 month instead of a physical hackathon, which goes on only for 2 days. So essentially in an online hackathon, our clients, they can get more value out of the candidates. They can get more value out of the engineers. And the engineers can also build some more complex products. They can spend more time on the solutions. They can spend more time on the innovation and build better products.
I think that the time thing that was mentioned, I think is a really key part of it, because I think it's the case that when you're dealing with, especially kind of lockdown type situations, and you're dealing with people who are, maybe not going out to restaurants and not going out to events and we're spending more time at home, people have more time to do these things. but that makes it more competitive, right? To try to capture their time. And I think they're sort of maybe not sort of deductively, this maybe doesn't make sense, but I think they're more judicious with the time that they have. And they're wanting to go deeper into products that they really relate to and that resonate with them and that they enjoy. So I think the thing for us is creating that experience for them, being much more focused on the experience for them and the feeling that they get when they use our platform to try to increase those other kind of time metrics. And we kind of mentioned trust and sort of, trust proxies. And we find that, we were already obviously heavily focused on digital. I don't see that changing. And I don't see that becoming different, but I think that the behavior of the users is changing. And so that's the thing that you have to sort of get your head around is how are they reacting differently? Okay, are they spending more time? What are the kinds of things that they want to spend time on? That's shifting, and that's sort of a challenge for everybody to try to figure out what the answer to those questions are.
So I'll come to my last round. This is a rapid fire round, as we call it. Essentially, I'll be asking one question to which you have to answer in one word or at best a line. This will be the Catalyst League 3, if I can call it. Alex, if not a founder, then what would you have been?
Writer.
A writer. Right. Teague?
Lawyer, again.
Gaurang?
Product manager.
Product manager. All right. So you upgraded, you want to come down now. Have a chill life after that.
Exactly.
One skill or expertise that you think is required to be an entrepreneur?
Coping with stress and keep going on.
Alex?
Crisis management, I would say. Yeah, dealing with the bad situations. I think that's the key.
Teague?
Vision. You got to know where you're going all the time.
So if I can sort of summarize, understand how to cope with stress, be a crisis manager and have a vision, that's where you start. The larger the vision, the bigger the stress and crisis management maybe. Great. One adjective for digital business of 2025. It's 5 years down the line.
Evolving.
Decentralized.
Incentivized. Kind of continuing what Gaurang said, that's part of the decentralization. Incentivized.
The last question, and this will be random. What aspect of your business doesn't let you sleep at night?
Well, the time zone challenge literally doesn't let me sleep at night because I think I had calls in five different time zones. The major thing is, are we taking advantage of every opportunity that's a good opportunity for us? Because I think when you're in the stage and you're growing so quickly, it's really easy to chase sort of bright, shiny objects around and kind of get your head around all these different things. I think the main thing for me is just, are we putting the right amount of bandwidth and effort into the right opportunities? I think is the thing that probably causes me to miss the most sleep.
Maybe you need to have trusted partners all across the world and then sleep peacefully, just like you have one in India.
That's helpful. Definitely helpful.
Alex, what aspect of your business doesn't let you sleep at night?
It's execution in one word, which is, everything that vision is great, but you have to deliver on the promise. And that's what exactly around the clock. I have my team members all around the world. And track and delivery is making sure things happening. In startup environment, you're responsible for everything, right? That's why I think execution and making sure that things are going the right direction.
Gaurang?
For me, it's kind of a humble brag. It's like having too many ideas in my head.
You have too many ideas. You just need execution partners, I guess, then.
Ideas about actually executing things, ideas about how to grow the sales, ideas about how to cope with the stress, Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We've had a great learning session. At least I personally have learned a lot from all of you, especially founders. I'm sure you have your own experiences, the ups and downs. I'm glad you took time out across the time zones and slept at night, maybe won't sleep at night again tonight. But I'm glad you spent the time with us. Hope you had fun.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Deepak.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gaurang. If you want to reach out to us, just mail us on hello@etcatalyze.com and watch all our episodes also on the website etcatalyze.com.